I mean, they've been controlling it for a really long time because when the precious metals, when gold and silver price rise, it indicates a failing currency. And they don't want you to know that.
Hey friends, that was Lynette Zang. Talk about long time no hear. It's about time we get back in touch with Lynette and talk about the elephant in the room, the destruction of our currency, our purchasing power, and our future. Friends, before we begin this interview, just a quick word about this interview's sponsor. So get this, 49.1% of adults in the United States are obese. Typical recommendations for weight loss are to stay physically active, count calories, and cut out the carbs. But if those recommendations alone worked, nobody would be overweight. That's why I love Keto Elevate, which you can get at ketowithsgt.com. It's the quickest way I know to lose weight. It works in a similar fashion to how the popular keto diet works, which is it melts fat, tones your muscles, and reduces cravings. Of course, I recommend working out as well, but I highly recommend Keto with SGT. Try it today for 51% off by going to ketowithsgt.com. I'll leave the link right below this interview. And welcome back, friends. Thank you so very much for tuning in. Boy, it's been far, far too long since I've had this brave, intelligent woman on who's been warning you what was coming, and now it's here. Inflation, inflation everywhere. It's Lynette Zang from ITM Trading. Hi, Lynette.
It's very glad to be here, Sean. Thank you for having me. It's been way too long.
Yeah, and what's sad is that nothing's happened. We don't have anything new to talk about. I mean, the country's in good shape, the borders are secure, taxes are going down, spending is being reeled in by... Oh, wait. No, that's the dream I had last night. Actually, we're living a nightmare.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Well, I hadn't planned on leading with this, but I just received this email. I'll read it right now. Spotify takedown notification. Well, it turns out that I've just been banned. My SGT Reports the Propaganda Antidote podcast has been banned from Spotify. Now, they say it's come to our attention that your podcast contains potentially infringing content. Therefore, it has been taken down. Now, the podcast is usually me interviewing people like you, Lynette. I'm not sure how that infringes on anything other than their control of a corrupt narrative. But they're happy to pay Joe Rogan $100 million to host his podcast.
Wow. Wow.
The censorship just is unending. It's unrelenting.
It is.
Every time. Look, thank God for places like BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey. Mike Lindell's working on his new platform, Frank. Who else? We've got Brighteon from Mike Adams. It's going to be up to the Patriots to take the narrative back and save this country, but you know that. Let's just do a quick news roundup. I joked that there's nothing to talk about. Well, how about this? Inflation. Jim Grant saying the Fed can't control it. You weigh in any time. I don't think truer words have been spoken. Stanley Druckenmiller warns the Fed is endangering the dollar reserve status. You think, Lynette? How about Biden and his $11 trillion in new spending over the next year or two? And here's one. Nobody wants to work. Job openings soared a record high 8.1 million jobs. And Zero Hedge notes, why work when Uncle Joe will pay you not to? And this one, and I think this one is spot on because this is exactly what I fear. And remind me later in this conversation, I have sort of a solution, I think, for states. And I'm certainly not the first to think of this, but I actually articulated it in an email to my friend Chris Marcus last night. And we'll talk about Wall Street Silver. I want to talk to you about the COMEX, the LBMA, all of that great stuff. But John Rubino fears Mad Max scenario ahead. And I think he's right. I think those days are coming unless we fix all this, and I don't see how we're going to fix it.
Well, if you look at Lyle Brainerd, he came out today and said, well, how is it going to help if we pull back? It's going to really hurt people creating jobs. Yeah, there you go. So they're going to keep going on the same trajectory because they don't have any other tools. And it benefits them. This is pure and simple. It's wealth transfer. It's been that way since the day we were born. And the sooner you recognize it and make good choices that support your best interest, the better off you're going to be, because this train will hit a wall. It absolutely will. Intentionally.
Yeah. And it is wealth transfer. It really is taking from those that produce and giving to those that don't, in the form of even these stimulus, quote unquote, stimulus checks. You know,
Right?
the bar was not very high to
No.
disqualify those for making too much. If you're a small business owner and you're pulling in $100,000 a year through your own blood, sweat, and tears, working 80 hours a week, you're not getting that money. But people that aren't producing, college students who really, people not even working, Lynette, are getting these checks. In my view, that really is the ultimate example of a communist transfer of wealth.
Oh, I would go a little bit further than that because it seems very fascist to me. And it is a transfer of wealth. When you look at, there are families that are making 150,000 a year with additional benefits from this stimulus of 14,000. And it's really leading up to universal basic income because they've destroyed the middle class and they've destroyed the jobs. But yet we're in a consumer driven economy. So if the consumer doesn't have money to spend, how are you going to keep the economy going?
Right. Now you said 14,000. Did you mean 1,400?
No, no, no. No. That was when you total up all the child tax care credits
Oh,
and, it's like when you total up all of it, there was a report that came out, probably a month or so ago, and they really did like a line item. And no, no, it was for a family of four making 150,000 a year. It was 14,000 in benefits and stimulus benefits, additional benefits.
but you know what? In fairness, we are really burying the lead. The real transfer of wealth has been to
That's the
the
problem.
billionaire class. They shut
Absolutely.
down our economy on the back of the Wuhan lab escaped coronavirus, which Dr. Fauci is up to his eyeballs in, friends.
Absolutely.
And guess who became multi billionaires? Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, the list goes on and on. The
Yep.
CEO, Tim Cook of Apple.
Yep. But you see, the last time they did a direct handoff in 2008, they couldn't get away with it this time. So this time they had to go to the little guy on the street and give them something. But it's the same old trickle down theory that they know does not work because it does not really trickle down. And even the little bit that does, by the time it gets to the you and me, then what you're looking at is a whole lot less purchasing power, a whole lot less.
That's right.
And it's hidden. We're talking about inflation coming in. Well, it never left. It's the speed of the inflation that makes it noticeable, but it's transitory. Well, it hasn't been transitory since 1913. Pretty sure it's not going to be transitory now.
Well, inflation is beginning to look like a hockey stick chart, and we've been
Yeah,
talking about the potential for hyperinflation for as long as you and I have been talking.
yeah.
And it seems to be here. Like, I don't want to overstate this and scare the hell out of people, but I'm starting to get a little bit nervous when, the prices of things people need in their everyday lives, copper, that plays a role in our everyday lives. The things you buy are made with copper. Lumber, if you want to buy a house, if you want to build a house, why do you think house prices are going through the roof, friends? Well, building a new one is going up in exponential fashion. And what else?
Can
Gasoline
we, can
price.
we can we
Yeah.
stay on housing for just a second though too? Because that buying rental property used to be a mom and pop. But 2008, when they decimated the real estate market, then you had big corporates going in. Now it's the corporations going in, so you've got the big builders that are building entire developments that the large corporations are buying at one fell swoop, which mom and pop can afford that, and they don't have access to the free money like those big corporations do as well. And these are all for rental units because you are going to own nothing and be happy.
That's right.
It's garbage. It's garbage.
That's the Klaus Schwab Great Reset propaganda, and that's where they want to take us. And I want to back you up on that. Can you imagine being a property owner, a rental property owner, who had amassed a small or moderate size, maybe a large portfolio of properties, And the CDC declares that you can't evict people because of coronavirus,
Yep.
because they shut down the economy, and then these squatters stop paying their rent. Therefore, you possibly could go bankrupt. I think many property owners and rental income owners have gone bankrupt. And guess who gets to buy up all those properties on the cheap? These same corporations you're referring to.
Voila. I mean, this is a rigged game, and it's always been rigged, but it doesn't always have to be rigged moving into the future. That is our choice if we can get enough people to wake up, which is why they're censoring you, Sean.
Well, we also need patriotic, honest people in government.
Yes.
We need
Yes.
people like, for instance, I believe there was a federal judge just a week or two ago, maybe it was last week, who ruled that the CDC does not have the power to declare that landlords cannot evict tenants who aren't paying. So thank God for that, because the CDC, being a private organization who's mandating what? All of these terrible measures, stay masked forever, vaccinate the kids, an experimental biological agent, the CDC has the power to declare what you can do with your property? That is absolute fascism. It's the definition of fascism.
Exactly. Exactly. And and it's also a trickle down because those mortgages, those rent payments that have been securitized, which who really does that? It's the big corporations. Well, those have to be subsidized because they don't really want anybody to realize what's actually happening in the real estate market. But the mom and pops don't get subsidies.
Well, we haven't spoken in a long time. I've got a couple of things on my radar here I want to talk to you about. Of course, silver. Everything's hyperinflating except silver and gold. I mean, I tell you, salt in the frickin' ointment. I'm telling you, salt in the wound, Lynette. I was in the shower this morning mumbling to myself. I was thinking about doing a little meme video, a little joke saying, silver, $40. It's a great day to buy because silver's going to the moon. Litecoin, $5. Next day, silver, $32. That's a bargain. I'll buy more. It's going to the moon. Next day, Litecoin, $12. And on and on and on to Litecoin, $400, silver stuck at 26. I mean, give me a break.
Well, because you remember the video we did a long time ago on the goal, which is to hold title of all assets, hold everything in these digital coins that are controlled by the central bankers, by the IMF. And we can watch this unfold. And of course, where do they want people? Do they want people in real hard wealth and assets that are outside of their system that they can't see? No, they do not. And I know some things are anonymous but they don't have to be anonymous. They can change the rules. They can change the laws. We have to get new government in, and I can't believe I'm saying that on air. But you're braver than I am, Sean.
Well, you probably still have your YouTube platform. Is that true?
I do.
Yeah, you know what? If I could rewind time, I'd be a little bit smarter and I wouldn't couch my words. I would just use my YouTube channel to say, hey guys, the new video is up and it's filled with stuff I can't say on this platform on YouTube. So head on over to my BitChute channel, Rumble, Odyssey. That's what I should have done because the writing was on the wall. But I'll be honest with you, before they deplatformed me and dozens of my friends, dozens of others in the alt news space on October 15th of this past year, I thought the election was pretty much in the bag for Donald Trump, and then they stole it. So it makes perfect sense. They didn't want us talking about the big steal, and they still don't. The election recount going on in Maricopa County, boy, the mainstream media, their hair's on fire over that thing. They're panicked. Rachel Maddow can't shut up about the fact that there's a recount going on, and she's trying to disparage it as lunacy. Meanwhile, maybe you can't say these things, but I can. They stole the election, and now we are suffering. We are seeing the results of what the deep state wanted, of what a stolen election looks like, and what an illegitimate president looks like. And it's not good. It's not good for the country. It's not good for our children. It's not good for our futures, Lynette. It's darn scary, to be honest with you.
Well, I hate to say this, Sean, but the truth is the writing has been on the wall for a very long, long time. And so until we get to the end of this thing, that's when we have the opportunity to really make powerful change. But we have to get enough people aware of what's happening. Do they really want a more fair system for their children, for their grand? I mean, I'm 66. I figure I'm going to be around for another, 34 years or so. I think I'm going to make it to be 100. But that's a very short period of time compared to looking at my granddaughter or all my grandchildren that are, 6 to 14 to 15 rather. So, they've got a lot longer. And, I always used to be amazed when I looked at my grandfather. He lived to be 99, and he was born in 1874. And I used to think, wow, look at what he saw. I mean, the automobile and the phone and electricity and all of that. But the speed, the technology has sped everything up so much that what I've seen in my lifetime and will yet see is a lot more than what he saw, and our kids too. I mean, I think kids today have to prepare for what, 8 different careers? How in the world? How in the world? I mean, thank God I focused in really a pretty narrow space so that I could see everything that I needed to see to be able to be in front of you and have this discussion with a perspective of history behind me and things that I've gotten to live through.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of young people are waking up to the fraud that is college,
Yes.
to the degree that if you're going to go to one of these institutions of lower learning and you're going to be indoctrinated by liberal professors to the Marxist ways and end up with, $100 or $200,000 in debt, you are a serf. You're also going to be a brain dead, brainwashed zombie serf. So a lot of young people, at least young men, are turning to 2-year tech degrees, and they're becoming electricians or plumbers. They're learning the trades because that is where demand is. A lot of demand in those trades. And, you can make $50 an hour as an electrician, $100,000 a year as an electrician.
But here's the problem with that, Sean. That is still a paycheck to paycheck income. It used to not be. There was a day when that was really a lot of money, a substantial amount of money. And this is the piece that really, I think, keeps people hooked in, is that nominal confusion piece. I mean, the stock market's going up, as you said before, Litecoin, Bitcoin, the cryptocurrencies are moving. Everything is going up in nominal terms, except for physical gold and physical silver, which are basically staying within a flat trading range, even though their value, their true value for their most important function, which is to hold your wealth, hold your purchasing power intact, that in reality is actually going up, even though you can't see it. So people go, well, let me go over here because it's going up in nominal terms. Even income. I mean, excuse me. And now they're saying, well, we can't get people to come in and take jobs. Well, I wonder why, but at any rate. And so we're going to have to pay them more to entice them to come to work. But still, if you look at, I just pulled it the other day, purchasing power of the consumer dollar on the Fed, it is down yet again on its persistent march to zero. We have to wake up and realize what true value is, what your value is, what my value, what each individual's value is, and demand to be paid based on the value that we bring to the system.
Well,
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just that the problem is when there are no markets, when there are no real markets, there are no fair and accurate measures of value. Take a look at silver and gold. Those are stores of energy. Those are stores of human labor. That's why they're supposed to appreciate in value when the Fed prints. And I'm 100% sure now that the banksters, the criminal banksters, continue to manipulate precious metals, gold, specifically silver, but both metals, with
both of them.
paper every single day. They cap the prices, they kneecap gold and silver to quell demand. Of course, they also created the SLV and the GLD ETFs to siphon off demand for the physical. We know that.
Yep.
But I also believe that cryptos, and by the way, there's many great people, smart minds behind very real projects. Ethereum is a real project. Bitcoin, in my view now, I believe, Lynette, is a real store of value. But I believe the cryptos were created and are allowed to flourish to siphon off demand for precious metals, which really begs the question, if and when the system does totally collapse, who will be left holding the most gold and silver? Probably the criminal banks.
Well, yes, but individuals can work on that too. So, does it have to be the most, or do you have to have as much as you possibly can to take advantage of the last piece of wealth transfer? Because I'm not waiting for Wall Street to tell me that gold or silver is worth X or Y or Z, because we know. I mean, they even admit, and they have, periodically since they started the spot contract back in the 70s, early 80s, they've admitted that the whole function was to control the visible price, because then they control what we see and therefore how we think. Perspective management, perception management, that's a huge key for them. But at the end of the day, when all confidence is lost, and this certainly with the advent of the inflation really becoming super visible for people, having to make choices between food or medicine or food or their car or what have you, the rest of the confidence is lost. And then what they'll have to do, which is the same thing they've done forever, is the governments and the central banks revalue, reset the value of the fiat money, the government garbage money, against physical gold. And that's when you'll see both gold and silver begin to express toward its true fundamental value as that store of energy, as that store of labor, as that store of wealth. And so whoever's holding that, that's who's going to benefit. That's who's going to benefit. And at the minimum, you're going to be able to help people that you love if you have enough.
Well, here's what makes my blood boil, and my heart goes out to all of you who are listening who have really put much, if not all, of your investment energies into precious metals. You have been robbed and you have been cheated, and I will quantify that for you right now. I've said this before, Lynette, and I just did some back-of-the-envelope math here. A tube of Silver Eagles over the past several years could have easily been bought at $25 per ounce. It's a little bit more than that today. Call it 30, but let's use 25 since that's the math I did. 20 Silver Eagles in a tube times 25 is $450. There are listeners right now who have a tube or many tubes of Silver Eagles in their little vault at home or stored somewhere safely, and some of you paid more than that, some of you paid less than that, but let's call it $450. Lynette, if you take out the COMEX, the Wall Street Open price fixing on a daily basis over the past 25 years, there are mathematicians and statisticians that have done the math on this. The price of silver today, without the Wall Street Open manipulation, would be $230 an ounce. That means your tube of Silver Eagles, your 20 Silver Eagles, would be worth $4,600. Lynette, in a world of $55,000 Bitcoin and $4,000 Ethereum and $350 Litecoin, the Silver Eagles, the 20 Eagles, should be worth $4,600, if not more.
Well, that's true, but again, we're going to nominal, and the advantage of them suppressing the price is that it enables you to still buy. Although availability is definitely in question these days. So no more waiting, but I've been accumulating, gosh, Sean, I used to give 10 Silver Eagles when anybody had a baby, right? That was sort of my go-to baby gift, because it was like $4.38 that I was paying for this stuff. So I could afford to give them a $40 gift. And we get caught up in that. And I know that that's really frustrating. And what it does is it discourages people and they go, oh, this is never going to happen because they can control it forever. And, and this is wrong. And it is wrong. And they've been controlling it for they've been controlling it for a really long time. Because when the precious metals, when gold and silver price rise, it indicates a failing currency. And they don't want you to know that. But I personally am not disheartened by any of it, because the more they suppress it now, it's like a coiled spring. And you hold your hand on the spring and you hold it there and you hold it there. When they do that reset and they move their hand from that spring, well, how high is that in nominal terms? Price going to fly. But it isn't even that, because at that point, everybody will be quite clear on how little value, if any, no value, that fiat money really has. But for those that will then be sucked into the completely digital system, that's going to be a real problem. For those of us that have been wise enough to accumulate and not believe the Wall Street lies, but just keep stacking, that's where the rewards will be. And not because you're going to convert it back into the fiat money that then everybody knows is worthless, but because you're going to be able to convert it into then undervalued real assets that can generate income. Or silver, you're going to be able to convert it into food, into gasoline, into those things that you need to maintain a standard of living.
Right. Well, listen to this. So I think it was Mike Maloney who wrote in his book, I know that he said it many, many times, in the future, you'll probably be able to buy a median-priced home for around 500 ounces of silver. Well, I'm not sure what a medium-priced home is today. I guess it's around $250,000. It wasn't.
No, I think I saw those numbers. Don't hold me to this, but I want to say 328, Sean.
Okay, well, it's going up as we know, but a couple of years ago, I think it was around $230,000. So let's just use that because, at that $230 unmanipulated price of silver, guess what? 1,000 ounces of silver would buy you that median-priced home. So we're getting there, right? We're sort of headed in that direction. But you talk about once they remove their hand from the spring, well, I don't know if they're ever going to remove their hand from that spring. Even in a great reset, they might manipulate the metals if they're allowed to get away with it, which is why I want to ask you about the Wall Street silver guys. I really like that movement. The information getting out to the people, the billboards going up, inflation is coming, buy silver. What do you see going on at the COMEX? The LBMA looks like it's empty.
Well, and then they can say, like they did, they just came out this morning, admitted that they didn't have all the silver that they said that they had back in March during that silver squeeze. Right? So, if you're going to wait for Wall Street will never do it because it benefits them not to. But at the end of the day, it is really all about confidence. It really is. So as long as people look at those numbers and believe them, they'll be able to do it. But with inflation ratcheting up and becoming more and more obvious, and that income inequality and wealth inequality divide becoming more and more obvious, there is a bit of a revolution that is going on and probably picking up steam.
Well, anybody with two brain cells to rub together knows there's a problem because didn't the Fed just discontinue publication of the M1 money supply, or is it the M2 money supply? They don't want people to know how much money they're printing. Meanwhile, they're calling inflation transitory. Well, how can inflation be transitory when all they do is print and debase the currency, Lynette?
Well, exactly. But even now, why they said that they stopped print, they discontinued that. Because in 2019, we entered an ample reserve regime, which means money printing. So they use this excuse. Now banks have to hold zero reserve, and they reclassified your savings deposits and your money market deposits as, rather than a savings account, it is now a demand deposit, like a checking account, because they are going to force people to spend. And the lie about all of the money printing not being inflationary. I mean, you remember when they went from a 2% target to a 2% average so that they would let inflation run hot. And at that time, when they did that, I said, well, there's their excuse. They're going to say, don't worry about the inflation. We're going for an average, when they hadn't been able to, well, according to their metrics anyway, hit that 2%. So I think it really is about confidence. I think people need to wake up, lose confidence in who is guiding this train wreck, and take control, become their own central banker, buy physical gold, buy physical silver. Don't worry about what Wall Street says about it. I had somebody tell me the other day, oh, I can't buy gold in here. It's way too expensive. Oh, no, but you'll buy Bitcoin or you'll buy stocks because they're not too expensive? Why don't you really look at the true valuation? Because at the end of the day, all assets, all instruments go to their true fundamental value. For dollars, for any fiat money, wherever you're listening to this, any government-based money, that number is zero. And last time I checked, 10 trillion times zero is still zero.
Right. You know, just because you mentioned Bitcoin, I'll just say I remember like it was yesterday, but a few years ago, it wasn't that long ago, guys. I remember when Bitcoin hit par with gold, and it was when gold was around 1,200, 1,250, and Bitcoin hit that price, 1,250, and then it went beyond gold. And now here we sit with gold at what, 1,850, 1,900, and Bitcoin's at 55,000. Mm-hmm. See, there is hyperinflation happening, and we see it in the cryptocurrencies. But let's talk about solutions, because you said be your own central bank. I tried to articulate this last night in an email. Let me read this to you. I want your thoughts on this as a potential solution. I know I'm not the first, and this really takes us back to the founders in the original 13 colonies and their money. But what about this? I wrote, states are going to need to disavow the Fed Reserve and the Fed government if the tyranny in D.C. and currency debasement leading to hyperinflation continues. Gradually untethering the state's economy, each state's economy, from the U.S. Federal Reserve dollar and declaring silver and gold as an untaxable legal tender in those states that break away is step one. Step two would be to create a sovereign state-backed money guaranteed by the state's tax collections and state treasury, issued by the state's treasury and tied to silver and gold and even a little Bitcoin if they like. Such actions will be the only way to neuter this move toward a global government and global currency if, I wrote, if the white hats don't remove the illegitimate president before he burns it all down. That said, friends, Trump was spending and that administration was spending too. All right, we'll continue here. If we wait for a hyperinflationary total economic collapse, it will be too late, as the population will welcome any tyrannical global solution that allows them to eat and to feed their children. In my example, during the first month that the new money is introduced in a state, think Texas, the new Texas buck or Texas dollar could be issued at a set price of, say, maybe $5 or $10 USD per one Texas dollar. How many people, Lynette, would trade their Federal Reserve notes for metals-backed Texas bucks? I would guess demand would be gargantuan. I'd trade 50 grand for 10,000 Texas bucks backed by allocated precious metals on the blockchain or in storage at a facility in Texas. However, after the first month, that window would close and the Texas dollar would be free to trade, but it would trade tied to the inverse of the U.S. Federal Reserve dollar and printing, and therefore it would be set to appreciate in value as new USD is printed by the Fed, thus increasing the number of USD needed to buy one Texas buck. In a few years, the average Texas home when priced in Texas buck might be just some fraction of the cost of that same home priced in U.S. Federal Reserve notes. I acknowledge that the hole in this plan is that physical silver and gold are kneecapped and prevented from appreciating by criminal banks, but in this example, demand for the Texas buck by people longing to flee the U.S. dollar will be the main driver, even more than the Fed USD printing. I'll leave it to the mathematicians to work out the specific Texas buck appreciation formula, but I know this: the rise in cryptos illustrates that people want out of U.S. Federal Reserve notes. They want an alternative to this debasement. The flood of demand for Texas bucks from the Texas Treasury would leave it flush with incoming Federal Reserve USD notes, which they would then use to purchase more gold and silver, maybe a little Bitcoin, for the Texas Bullion Depository, which exists, as you know, Lynette, in Texas. It's a real Fort Knox in Texas. And this takes us back to the original colonies, minus the counterfeiting by King George's army. The time is near for these steps to be taken before hyperinflation leaves the 99% as serfs. So I know I'm not the first to articulate that, but it's the first time I've articulated it, and I think Texas should move in that direction. So should Florida. So should South Dakota. Free states need to rebel against the tyranny of the central banks.
Well, I agree, and maybe that's why the Treasury is giving states all of this money and saying that they're going to have free reign to do it because they're being bought off at this point. Anyway, I mean, that just came out. Janet Yellen said, yeah, we're giving them all of this money, but they'll have free reign to use it as they wish. And there are a number of states that have, as you well know, declared gold and silver legal tender because it is. It's real proven money that has gone through this before. I hope it happens before. But see, here's the other thing, Sean, really. I mean, the whole system is based upon constantly compounding debt. So how could the states, with the circumstance that they've put themselves in and the pension obligations and all of the other obligations, all of the bonds, I mean, they're going to still have to burn off that debt in some way. And that's what the hyperinflation is really about. Burning all of that garbage off so that you can start at zero.
Right. But in my proposal here, what I'm suggesting is that a parallel system needs to be set up before this current system crashes. Because the parallel system, it would be very much like cryptos. That's a parallel system. So those that invested in Litecoin at $5 and Ethereum at $19 a couple of years ago, they're sitting on a mountain of USD. So they're not suffering the effects of this hyperinflation. You know, people are so afraid of hyperinflation right now that Google searches for hyperinflation and inflation in the United States have hit an all-time high. So even our next door neighbors that aren't wired in, they don't speak the language we speak. They may not know that the Federal Reserve is a private criminal bank. They may not know that the Federal Reserve was founded by the Morgans and the Rothschilds and all of these deep-moneyed European bankers and banking establishment families in 1913 under Woodrow Wilson's watch on Jekyll Island. They don't speak the language, but they're terrified that their currency is inflating and losing its purchasing power.
Yeah, definitely people that do not really pay attention and understand it and even deny it. You know, it's really obvious now. The inflation is coming in, and it's not going to stop. I mean, even airline travel. My sister was telling me the other day, flights that usually cost her round trip under $400 to go see her grandchildren, they're now over $600. And that, you know, you're not talking about a matter of years. You're talking about, you know, a matter of weeks.
I know, but you know this is all by design. I know you know that. I know listeners know that. This is all by design, friends.
Absolutely.
Everything's going through the roof. The prices of everything are going through the roof on purpose. Lumber, there was a video shot by a man, I believe he was up in Canada, showing lumber stacked as far as the eye can see near a railroad track. Instead of bringing it into the economy, these monopolistic lumber corporations, they control the supply. So what do you think happens to demand when they tighten supply on purpose? I'll give you another example. How about the shutdown of that gas pipeline, Lynette, under a cyber attack? Well, guess what? Who's been warning that the next shoe to drop is a cyber attack? The World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. That's what they've been warning. That's what's coming. So I think this is all manipulated. How about this? They shut down the economy on the back of the China virus. And guess what? All of the rental car companies have to go out of business or sell off their fleet. So now you want to go to Hawaii, you can't get a rental car. You got to rent a U-Haul.
Yeah, or it's
Oh,
$700 a day. We were just talking about that.
it just infuriates me. And we got to call these people out by name. And fortunately now, the tide is turning in the court of public opinion as it relates to Bill
Yes.
Gates. I don't think his wife even wants anything to do with this scumbag anymore. Honestly, she may not even know how knee-deep he is in the eugenics movement. I think she probably does. But what if she was just an unwilling spouse that loved the guy, and thought he was a philanthropist? I mean, all my neighbors do. Most of the country believes that that's the case. He's just a good guy who's donated his billions of dollars to do good all over the planet. No. He's created a foundation which is tax exempt. They hide their money, and he's rolling out a eugenics plan all over the world. And he and Fauci are knee deep in the China virus vaccine. So we got to call these people out while there's still time, and they should be rounded up and arrested.
Absolutely. But I want to go back to something that you said about the lumber and let's talk about energy too, because we certainly saw what happened with the Texas this past winter with the energy. So you have a tightening of availability, intentional or otherwise, whatever. But you have a tightening of availability at the same time that these banks and these traders are given massive amounts of free money. So it isn't just a tight supply. You have to look at all of that extra liquidity that the feds and the government as well is pumping into the system. And that's where all of the hyperinflation, well, not all of it, now it's starting to leak out. But it's not just one thing or one area. This whole thing has been set up because the only tool they have are interest rates and printing money. That's it. And it's like a domino effect. You tweak this here and it's going to have an effect all the way down the line. Unfortunately, the little guy is sitting right here, right where that domino is going to fall.
Right.
It is a combination of factors. Absolutely a combination of factors. And is this planned? Well, my mom always used to say to me, when Greenspan was the Fed chair, well, Lynn, don't you think Greenspan's smarter than you? Don't you think he's smarter than you? And I'd say to her, Ma, he has a lot more power than I do, so I certainly hope he is a lot smarter than me. But if he actually believes the garbage coming out of his mouth, then maybe he's not. And when I read that article on Lyle Brainerd this morning from the Fed, saying, well, but we can't like rein all this liquidity in because it's going to hurt job creation. Did we just have a really bad jobs report?
Yeah, which is puzzling because then again today the line item is 8.1 million jobs that can't be filled because people are sitting around getting their stimulus checks or their unemployment that goes on forever. But
I have to say, I don't really think that is enough to really pay for a family.
No, I know. These are small business jobs. I mean, Chipotle, I just heard they're going to raise their labor rate, their wage to $15 an hour because they're having a hard time getting people to work in those stores. A general manager at Chipotle in the same news item said a general manager in a Chipotle store can make $100,000 a year. So again, we're seeing salaries inflate too, which I guess is good if the Fed's going to keep printing. But I just want to circle back to what your mom said. That is the mindset of the average American who doesn't speak the language. Of course, people would believe that when they believe the Federal Reserve is part of the federal government, and they don't realize that the Federal Reserve is the Satan spawn of the international criminal bankers, Rothschild, Morgan, etc. So, of course, the heads of the Federal Reserve are going to be in the pocket of their masters, the international bankers that own the Federal Reserve. It's that simple. Your mom wouldn't know that any more than my neighbors know it.
Right.
So in
Right.
her defense, yeah, she would believe, well, you have to think he's smart. He's smarter than you, Lynette.
Well, he is smart, and I'm telling
I
you,
don't believe for a second he's smarter than you. I don't think any of these
thank
people
you.
are very smart. I think Dr. Fauci is a lot more evil
Oh,
than he is smart.
well, but he has a lot more power than I do. And, look, I read those reports from the Wuhan lab. I mean, they're all there hiding in plain sight. It's all hiding in plain sight. Even the CFTC, actually talking about how they overtly, how they manipulated the price of silver because it would have created a bigger problem. And I'm thinking it's for the derivatives market and the bankers, not for you and me that are sitting on a lot of silver.
Right. Uh,
They admit it. It's hiding in plain sight. People just
well,
don't
people are
see
starting to
it
figure it
or
out.
they
I
don't
mean,
believe it.
people are starting to figure it out, like the
Yeah.
Wall Street Silver Group. People are starting to figure out all, the face of criminality. And again, I want to sort of wind this up, pointing a finger directly at Dr. Fauci. The information is now coming out. This man who has been in his power center in Washington, D.C. for president after president after president, he went behind Donald Trump's back. He was funding the gain of function research at that Wuhan lab. The gain of function research allows these viruses, quote unquote viruses, to jump from one species to another. This is a bioweapon. Fauci's up to his eyeballs in what has happened here, folks. And it's all coming out. Whistleblowers are starting to blow the whistle and point the finger directly at Dr. Fauci, who tells you should double mask and shut down your business to stay safe. So it's all coming out, Lynette. As Steve Bannon likes to say, if one falls, they all fall. So I'm also praying for that recount in Maricopa County to continue and for the truth to come out, because get this, Lynette, the Department of Justice under Donald Trump, they wouldn't do anything about the election meddling and the clear-cut election fraud and the evidence of election fraud that occurred on November 3rd and 4th. They said that's a state's issue. But guess what? Now, in the Maricopa County recount, the DOJ is sending letters and threatening people saying this is a federal issue. Isn't that interesting? Under
Yeah.
Trump, they wouldn't do anything, but under Biden, they become weaponized and they don't want a recount to happen. That's the world in which we live, Lynette, and I've been saying for a long time, if Biden gets in, if Biden is now quote-unquote president, even though he wasn't lawfully elected, do we have a country at all?
Well, I think everybody needs to be as independent and self-sufficient as we go through this because it's going to get worse. I mean, I hate to say that because I feel like we have now entered the roaring 20s, just like in the 1920s to kick this off. I feel like they're using all of their weapons to create another 2020s roaring happy days are here again, but that is to shift us into the new system where we have zero privacy and zero control over our own lives.
That's right.
So you got to have food, water, shelter, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, and community. And we have to get really strong in community.
100%. And I'm going to round it out by saying this. You can't just hunker down and think you're going to survive what's coming because you've got everything that Lynette just outlined there. Those
Right.
things are important. But the only way to save this sinking ship is to get involved on a community level. Get
Yes.
involved at your school board. Get involved. Run for mayor. Get involved. Support a constitutional sheriff. Support a constitutional candidate for Senate and Congress, or run for Congress yourself. Because, friends, the truth is coming out. Even the New York Times is now calling out the CDC over disingenuous COVID guidance. Get this, Lynette. Quote, there is not a single documented COVID infection anywhere in the world from casual outdoor interactions, such as walking past someone on a street or eating at a nearby table. That's the New York Times. And the New York Times, in my book, is not a friend to the Constitution and the sovereignty of this nation. But even the New York Times is starting to call this stuff out. So unless people listening want to be ruled by billionaires like Gates and Klaus Schwab and Jeff Bezos and the trillionaires that they report to, like the House of Rothschild, you better get active on a local level. And I mean today. Lynette, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. We haven't spoken in so long. This was great. I want people to know that if they need physical silver and gold, if you want to prepare, you can always visit my friends at SD Bullion. They're sponsored my website, SGT Report. The banner's right at the top. But y'all, like Lynette, I do too. You can trust her. So if you want to go through Lynette, how do they get a hold of you and your team, Lynette?
Well, it's itmtrading.com and 888-696-4653. And I still am on YouTube, so you can watch my work there. I help you really decipher all of this garbage so that you can see the truth. I love Sean's work. I'm happy to be here. We shouldn't wait this long for the next time to have conversation. But yeah, we have a strategy, and that's really what makes us different. So it is just based upon historical, repeatable patterns, because this time is not different. We are inside of a reset. Sean, you and I have been talking about it for a really long time. You know, I've been talking about it since 2009. The system died in 2008. We have to be prepared. We have to be prepared. So our strategy is very broad-based.
All right, guys. Well, thank you all for listening. Lynette, thank you for coming back on. We'll get you on again here in another month or two.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here, Sean.
All right, thank you. And guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I want to thank you all who are able to find my podcast. I think it's still available via Podbean and iTunes. We'll see how long that lasts. But of course, that's why we created the sgtreport.tv private server. So if you want to support the work, or God forbid, if you can't find me anymore on some of your favorite platforms, just sign up at sgtreport.tv for a nominal monthly fee. We very much appreciate your support. Also, our subscribe stars, thank you so much for stepping in to fill the gap after we got terminated by Patreon. We only have about a third of the supporters that we had at Patreon. So Jack Conti, the demonic tyrant at Patreon, he did a pretty good hit on us, tried to take us out of the fight. He didn't succeed. Neither did YouTube. So thank you all for finding me wherever you did. And guys, for real news 24/7, you can visit us directly at sgtreport.com. The antidote to corporate propaganda 24/7. God bless you and your family. Bye-bye.